They stapled a red tag to my door and told me I couldn't leave. The first thing he did was staple the tag to my front door while I stood on the other side, holding my breath and listening to the metal bite into the wood. I opened the door because he used my full name. "Mr. Hale," he said, voice calm and close, like he had already decided I would answer. "Housing inspection, 5 minutes." He wore a dark coat with a reflective strip across the chest and a plastic badge on a lanyard. The badge showed a photo, a logo, and a barcode. It looked official enough to end the conversation before it started. He stood there patiently, waiting for me to do what he expected. I looked past him at the stairwell. The building lights flickered in their usual way. The lift stayed out of order again. 2 takeaway leaflets lay on the mat outside my neighbor's flat. Everything looked ordinary. "I didn't get any letter," I said. He lifted a clipboard and tapped it with his pen. "Access visit," he replied. "Safety update. It's routine. 5 minutes." He said it like an instruction already agreed to. I should have asked for a phone number. I should have checked the council website. I should have asked him to come back in daylight with an appointment. Instead, I stepped back. He entered and shut the door behind him with care, like he respected the hinges. He walked straight into my hallway, eyes scanning the walls, the ceiling corner, the smoke alarm, the fuse box. "Kitchen," he said. It came out like a direction. My feet followed before my mind caught up. I let him in. The kettle sat where I left it. A mug stood by the sink, tea stain at the bottom. A bag of groceries lay on the counter, half unpacked. He looked at the window latch. He looked at the extractor fan. He looked at the cooker. He wrote 3 marks on his clipboard, quick strokes, clean lines. He wrote as if he already knew what to write. "Bedroom," he said. I walked again. He checked the window. He checked the radiator. He checked the wardrobe door, opening it with 2 fingers like he expected something to jump out. Bathroom. He watched the mirror for longer than he watched anything else. I saw my own face reflected, pale from the overhead light. I saw him behind me, standing still, eyes on the glass. He lifted his hand and placed his palm against the mirror. For a second, the glass fogged under his skin, like his hand carried heat. Then the fog cleared and left a faint smear. He lowered his hand and looked at me. "You live alone," he said. "Yes," I replied. He wrote again. "You sleep alone," he said. I laughed once, short, to fill the silence. "Yes," I said. "What is this about?" He turned the tap on and let the water run. He watched the stream hit the basin. He watched it drain. He shut it off. "Stoppage risk," he said. "Call-outs, complaints, patterns." My stomach tightened. "I haven't complained," I said. He looked at my mouth, then at my eyes, like he watched how I formed words. "You will," he replied. He walked back into the hallway, shoes silent on the laminate. He stopped by the front door. He pulled a stapler from his coat pocket, the kind with a heavy metal jaw. I stared at it. He opened the door. Cold air from the stairwell pushed into my flat. He raised the stapler and fixed a red paper tag to the outside of my door. 2 staples, one at the top, one at the bottom. He shut the door again. The tag stayed out there, pressed flat against the wood. "What is that?" I asked. "That's your record," he said. "It's been activated." My mouth went dry. "Take it off," I said. He held my gaze. "Do not touch the tag," he said. He said it like a safety warning, like a child near a socket. I took a step toward the door anyway. My foot moved. My knee softened. My balance shifted wrong, like my body picked a different position without asking me. I stopped with my hand half raised. A fine tremor ran through my fingers. He watched me the way someone watches a dog learn a boundary. "You felt that," he said. I pulled my hand back to my chest. "What did you do?" I asked. "Nothing unusual," he said. This is how it starts. I want your supervisor, I said. Right now. He looked down at his clipboard. Sleep schedule, he said, as if he had heard a different question. Bedtime. I stared at him. Excuse me? He tapped his pen on the paper. Between 11 and midnight, he said. Wake time, around 6. My breath came shallow. How do you know that? I asked. He walked to my living room window and looked out through the blinds at the streetlights below. Rain had started outside, fine and steady. Routine, he said again. Patterns. He turned back to me. Tonight, he said. Just the single word. My throat tightened. What about tonight? I asked. He stepped closer. The air around him smelled old and sour, enough to make me breathe through my mouth. You will open the door when I return, he said. I won't, I replied. My voice sounded small in my own ears. He watched me in silence. My hand lifted toward the red tag again, as if I wanted to prove control to myself. The tremor returned. My fingers stiffened. I lowered my hand. He nodded once, like my body had answered for me. Stay awake, he said. I'll be back. I backed toward the kitchen, eyes locked on him. I'm calling the police, I said. I reached for my phone on the counter. My fingers touched it. My hand refused to grip. The phone slid across the surface and hit the floor with a dull clack. I bent down fast. My knees failed for half a second, like a pause in the signal. I caught myself on the cabinet handle. He watched. He did not move. He did not rush. He waited. I grabbed the phone on the second try and stood up, heart hammering. My screen lit. I tried to type. My thumb moved slow, heavy, as if the joint had thickened. Each tap landed late. His voice came from behind me. Calls cause problems, he said. Problems bring people. I turned. He stood closer than before. How did you get there? I asked. He didn't answer. He just looked at me, like the question didn't matter. My hands shook so hard the phone rattled against my palm. Get out, I said. He looked at the door, then back at me. Visit complete, he replied. He walked into the hallway. He opened my front door. The stairwell air rushed in again. Somewhere below, a door closed. A television played through a wall, muffled and ordinary. He stepped out. He turned back and looked at me. Do not touch the tag, he said again. Then he walked down the stairs, shoes silent, as if the concrete swallowed sound for him alone. I shut my door and slid the chain across. My hand stayed unsteady. I stood with my back against the wood, listening. I heard him go down one flight, two. Then the building turned quiet again, the kind of quiet that comes from people sleeping and plumbing settling. I stayed in the hallway for a long time, staring at the door. I kept thinking about the red tag on the other side. I kept thinking about the way my fingers locked when I reached for it. I sat on the floor with my phone in my lap and waited for my hands to stop shaking. At some point I stood up and walked through my flat, checking windows, checking the latch, checking the chain. I told myself it was a scam. I told myself he would go away. My eyes kept drifting to the door. The red tag sat out there in my mind like a bruise. Night came fully. Streetlights threw pale bands across my blinds. I sat on the sofa with every light on and my phone in my hand. I waited for the knock he promised. I waited with my body tense and my hands cold, and I listened to the building settle around me. Then the first knock came, one slow tap against the wood, then a second. Then the chain on my door rattled, as if someone tested it from the other side with a careful hand. The knock came again before morning. 3 taps, even spacing, enough force to carry through the door. I opened it. The inspector stood in the hallway, coat buttoned, clipboard held flat against his chest. His eyes moved past me first, then returned to my face. He looked like a man who already knew what I would do. The corridor no longer felt empty. Every door on the floor carried a red tag. Some doors had 1, some doors had 2. The door at the far end carried 4, placed carefully in a straight vertical line. "What is that?" I asked. "Inspection progress," he said. "Progress toward what?" I asked. He didn't answer. He stepped inside without waiting. His shoes left damp marks on the floor. His eyes moved fast, shelf to shelf, corner to corner, checking the room the way someone checks inventory. "Attendance is required," he said. "Attendance where?" I asked. He turned toward the stairwell. "Basement," he said. Before we moved, he stopped at the next door down the hall. Mrs. Calway lived there. She used a walker. Some days she stayed in bed. Her daughter visited once a week and carried the shopping upstairs. I checked on her after work because the building lift broke often and she avoided stairs. The inspector knocked once and opened the door himself. Mrs. Calway sat in her chair by the window, coat on, hair combed flat. Her hands rested on a folded blanket. She looked at him like she expected a delivery. "You missed the first notice," he said. "I couldn't get to the door." "That was noted," he said. He glanced at her legs and the walker beside the chair. "Mobility support ends today," he said. Her mouth opened and stayed that way for a second. "I can't go down there," she said. "My knees lock." He pulled a red tag from his clipboard and pressed it onto her door frame, smoothing it with 2 fingers. Then he placed a second tag beside it, level with the first. "Assistance arrives later," he said. "What kind of assistance?" she asked. He looked at her, then at the walker, then at the tags, like the tags answered for him. He turned away without another word. I stood in her doorway. "Mrs. Calway," I said. Her eyes shifted to me. They held the same calm the others had in the hallway. It scared me more than shouting. "You go with them," she said. "It's easier." "What happens to you?" I asked. She looked past me, out toward the hall. "Assistance arrives," she repeated, like she read it from a card. The inspector waited 2 steps away, already facing the stairwell. "Basement," he said again. People stepped into the corridor as we moved. Doors clicked. Chains dropped. Nobody spoke. They faced the stairs and followed the inspector the way people follow a fire drill. I walked with them because every time I stopped, the inspector stopped too, and his eyes stayed on me until I moved again. As we reached the stairs, I shifted my weight and felt it. My foot moved. My balance followed a moment later. The delay stayed faint, like pressure held just below the surface, waiting. I understood then that my body was still reacting to what he had done earlier. We went down. The basement lights stayed on, harsh and steady. Folding chairs filled the space in clean rows. Every chair faced the same direction. My neighbors filled the chairs, coats zipped, hands folded, eyes forward. Mrs. Calway took a chair in the second row. Her walker stood beside it, untouched. I noticed her legs first. They held her upright without support. Her feet stayed planted. Her knees bent further than they ever had before. Her hands pressed flat against her thighs, fingers locked, like they anchored her in place. She did not look at me. She sat there like everyone else, already included. That was when I noticed the man at the front. He stood beside a long table stacked with papers and pens. Everything on it was arranged carefully. He wore a plain jacket. His hair was neat. He waited. The inspector took a position near the wall. He stayed close enough to block the stairs without standing in front of them. "Begin," he said. The man at the table spoke. "From tomorrow, the building follows a new structure." Pens moved across paper at once. Chairs shifted once, then stilled. Movement happens during assigned windows. People outside those windows are taken. When he said that, My eyes moved past him and settled on the cages along the wall. Heavy metal doors stood closed at the far end. Fresh locks reflected the light. Somebody had bolted a chair to the floor inside one cage, facing the wall. The man continued. "Food distribution follows schedule," he said. "Eating outside assigned times leads to imprisonment." People wrote without pause. "Speech adjusts," the man continued. "Hallway conversation ends. Phone use follows schedule. Unapproved communication results in imprisonment." I turned to the rows. "He told you to stop speaking to each other," I said. A neighbor glanced at me, then back at the front. "Order helps," he said. The inspector moved closer to me. His presence closed the space. "Lower your voice," he said. I looked back at the cages. That was when it became clear. The rules were not about order. They were about stopping people from noticing each other. If nobody spoke, nobody compared notes. If nobody compared notes, nobody realized what was happening to them. Anyone who tried to explain it would stand out. Anyone who stood out would be dealt with. The man at the table continued. "Sleep follows assigned hours. Lights off, lights on. Compliance supports stability." A woman raised her hand. "My son works nights," she said. "He adapts," the man said. She wrote. I watched the room instead of the speaker. People nodded at words that damaged them. People wrote rules that reduced their lives. Nobody checked the cages. Nobody looked at the locks. The man finished reading. The papers on the table marked the last step. Signing them meant leaving the basement, the rules already applied. Chairs scraped the floor. People stood at once. A line formed. Mrs. Calloway stepped into it without touching her walker. Her steps stayed uneven. Her body carried her anyway. When my turn came, the inspector slid the paper toward me and placed the pen near my hand. I adjusted my grip on the chair back. My fingers hesitated before closing. The delay returned, quiet, exact. I understood then what refusal meant. The outcome stayed the same. I would end up in a cage. The inspector leaned closer. "Sign," he said. I held the pen above the line. The stairs sat behind him. The cages waited. The building pressed down from above. He waited because waiting made it feel like choice. My hand hovered. Everyone else had already decided. I set the pen down. The sound carried farther than it should have. The inspector nodded once, like he had reached the end of a checklist. My legs tightened on their own, my knees locked. I stayed upright for a second, then my weight shifted forward. Hands reached for me from behind. I did not turn around. I already knew where I was going.